Hello, gamers. Welcome to episode one of the Mr. Red Show. We're back at the Mr. Red Show. This is the 10 subscriber special, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a while since my last Mr. Red Show, episode zero. But today I decided, before we get into chapter 3 and 4, we talk about Deltarune chapters 1 and 2 and my thoughts in it as well. And as at the end, I'm gonna give a little theory that I have that may or may not be absolutely stupid, but we'll go with it. So we're starting off with chapter one and how I feel about chapter one. Chapter one was an introduction, right? It wasn't difficult. It was easy to go through, besides Jevil, of course. But it was still fun, even though the difficulty wasn't necessarily there. I still enjoyed the characters. There's Lancer and how Susie originally they were really into the whole hero stuff until later on. Eventually, they decide, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. Reluctantly, of course, but eventually she she starts to get it. She starts getting it. And even later on, at chapter two, beginning of chapter two, I think they realize what they're doing, right? They're saving the world basically, but they can't really tell anyone. So, Rouse is a very interesting character, considering the fact that Rouse knows a lot about the roaring, these dark fountains and stuff. I wonder where they got that information from, who they got it from. So that's interesting. You notice in Deltarune, chapters 1 and 2, it's like the main storyline seems to be very cartoonish, I guess I would say. Some of it is. But the endings are more dark. That's where things get a lot more darker. We start to see Chris take their soul out, throw it away, and have this knife, the red eyes. And now I'm going to get into my theories later on. But I'm predicting that things are going to take a turn in the middle of the story, in chapter 4. And that's where the story is going to get a lot more serious. That's what I'm thinking. But this is more chapter 1 was really just an introduction for characters, introduction on like battles and stuff like that. Jevil on the other hand. Let's talk about Jevil. Dude, I I can see me redoing Jevil again, and it might take me only a few tries this time to beat him again. And I'm going to when I get into the Snowgrave route. I don't have to do chapter 1 for Snowgrave, but I want to. It's going to be Snowgrave, no recruits. No one's getting recruited. There's no sparing monsters. There's no pacifying. So I'm going to go through all chapters doing that, including secret bosses, clean Jevil, so I can get things like the Devil's Knife and just try to get the most powerful weapons to make it easier for me. Now, those are, my thoughts I want to give out for chapter one. It was a great introduction. And if I was playing this like years ago, it would have gotten me like really excited and really wanting the release of chapter two like instantly. Now, speaking of chapter two, on to chapter two, the cyber world. So, chapter 2 was where things got a little bit more difficult. The enemies were more difficult here. It was a lot more of a challenge. Interesting, though, the secret boss for this one was actually much more easier than Jevil. In fact, I would go as far as to say the fight with the Giga Queen was actually harder than Spam 10, even though that should be easy, but I'm not very used to games like that, Punch Out games. So that was new for me. That was a game mechanic that was new. Chapter 2 is where things start to get to a point where you have a choice. That's where the Snowgrave route starts. And that's where Toby Fox says, hey, there might be more than one ending. This is where we had Birdley and Noelle be more involved in the story, right? We see Noelle is this scared girl, but she's becoming more and more brave throughout the story, it seems. And I'm interested to see where her character goes next. Because, at first she didn't know how to fight, she had to be taught to fight, and eventually, it was building up for her, getting used to that. And then eventually, at the end, she stands up to the queen, showing that she's gone more braver since then. Bertley seems to be a character that seems to be obsessed with getting the highest grade in the class, and seeing anything less than A plus is a failure, which means he's stupid, that he's dumb. He wants to be smart, but in reality, the only reason why he has such a high grade, anyways, is because Noelle was really helping him, and he later realizes later on he's not really as smart as you really think he is. He's not this genius, whatever. His 200 IQ, Einstein, I guess. Well, Einstein didn't have a 200 IQ, but you know what I'm saying. But he seemed to not get the message well. Instead of hey, I might not be the most smartest person in the world, but that's okay. No, it's hey, we should all just be stupid. But you know what? He's getting there. Chapter 2, we do get more into character development here and possibly into future relationships. We see Susie and Noelle in the Ferris wheel, and seems to be a they seem to share similar feelings with each other. And Susie seems to be sharing the same feelings with Noelle, and Noelle is sharing those similar feelings with Susie. Well, Burnley has feelings for Susie, so that's going to make things interesting. And Noelle is aware of this, and she doesn't seem to like it too much that Burnley has this crush on Susie, of course, because she also likes Susie. That's going to be interesting later on. I'm not sure how important that's really is to the story. It's not really. It's more of a side thing. And then we see potentially a similar thing at the asset section with Rouse and Chris. I mean, at least for me, for the options I'm choosing in the story, the route I seem to be taking is leaning towards that path. We'll see where that goes as well. Well, especially theories that I've heard that maybe Rouse might be Asriel, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think Rouse is a separate entity from Asriel. I might be proven wrong. I haven't really looked too much into the evidence, but I think Asriel and Rouse are two separate people, two separate entities. We do learn more about the Roaring as well, about the apocalypse and the Titans. And I'm sure we're going to encounter the Titans later on. I think the roaring might happen at some point, maybe. Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to happen. And if not, I don't know. But on to my theories before we get into chapter 3. I'm recording this on the same day that I'm going to upload the Spamton fight. And then on the same day, I'm actually going to start chapter 3 right now. So after this, later on the same day, I'm going to start chapter 3, which is going to be, I'm excited for that. It's going to be interesting. Can't wait to see how this continues. But here's my interesting theory. So bear with me here. I might be pulling at straws with this one, but here's what I think. I think it's important to understand something Toby Fox said, if I recall, that Deltarune was a game intended or is for people who completed Undertale. And when he says complete, at least how I interpret it as, is all three main routes: neutral, pacifist, true pacifist, and genocide. And maybe he just means, oh, you just completed true pacifist or you just completed an ending. But he until he confirms that, I'm suggesting he means all three routes. And this is important because I think the anomaly in Undertale, Frisk, did the genocide route and sold their soul, giving the demon, Kara, power, more power. The power made them powerful enough to even travel across the multiverse. And we know that Kara is an entity that can travel across the multiverse because they say it themselves. I'm pretty sure they say, let us erase this pointless world and move on to the next. Using the word us, implying that it's not just you, but Kara. Kara's going to move on to the next world with you. Implying that Kara can travel across different worlds. One of those worlds being, of course, the world that Deltarune is in. And so, and so, you might be saying, well, didn't Tilly Fox say you could leave off Undertale with the pacifist ending and that's going to remain. Deltarune isn't going to mess with that. It's not saying it must end at genocide. Well, yes, but here's the thing. When he says completed Undertale, I interpret that as all three main routes, including genocide, you sell your soul. You can play the game again and play the true pacifist run, and then move on to Deltarune. Just so you remember though, Kara follows you at the end of True Pacifist. You realize that Kara, you sold her soul. So at the end of True Pacifist, Kara is still there. So even after you move on to Deltarune after finishing True Pacifist, Kara can still follow you to that next world. Now, I think what Kara is doing is Kara is learning the environment, learning the world, and trying to figure out how to destroy it. And I think the Roaring Knight, I don't think it even matters that much. The Roaring Knight isn't the villain that we should be worrying about. The antagonist we should be worrying about is Kara, the demon. That's who we should be worrying about. This multiversal entity that wants to destroy worlds, destroy universes, and get more powerful. That's who we should really be worrying about. The Roaring Knight is just a distraction that Kara is taking advantage of. The Roaring Knight has nothing to do or has no very real connection with Undertale. It's not from Undertale. The Roaring Knight was going to happen regardless of whether or not Kara showed up. The Roaring Knight was always going to happen. Now it's just within the regular timeline. Kara is just taking advantage of that. Everyone is distracted on this Roaring Knight, but no one is suspecting Chris, who Kara is possessing. Kara is using Rouse, using what they are learning about with the Roaring Knight to figure out the best method to destroy this world. And they're going through the route of bringing about the roaring, whether they get the help of the knight or not. And if the knight tries to stop them, they'll just kill the knight. They don't need the knight because, just like the queen says, if the knight ever takes their leave, they could just make a new one. Because all lightners have the power to create a fountain. They don't need the knight. Kara doesn't need the knight. So if they have to kill the knight to get what they want, so be it. We know now that once Kara learns this information that all Lightners has the power to create a fountain, if determined enough, what did they do at the end of chapter 2? Create a fountain. Now, what's interesting is they wanted Toriel there. They definitely did. They slashed her tires for a reason. Now, what's interesting though is why they turned the TV on and why they opened the door, why they left it open. That's what's interesting to me. I don't really have an answer for that right now as to why they would do that. Now, as for more evidence, I guess, of the Kara connection, we see Chris, if I recall correctly, opening up a book about humans, I believe, and they turned the page that showed other humans and they quickly shut it. Interesting, and that interests me. And that reminds me of Kara having this hatred for humanity, hating humans, and it seems like Chris seems to have this fear of humans or something similar, I feel like, of other humans. There seems to be a connection there. Same thing, same connection with the knife and the red eyes. Kara hates humanity and seems to even hate themselves being a human, which is why they took their own life. And that's when eventually they became the demon, no longer human. And we see this happening with Frisk in the genocide route, where Frisk is no longer interpreted as a human. You go up to the mirror and no longer says, despite everything, it's still you. Instead, it just says, it's me, Kara. You're no longer human. And that's what Kara wants. Kara doesn't want to be human. Kara doesn't want humans. As to why, I'm not sure. And maybe you might be saying, oh, that's you're looking at it the wrong way. And I might be. I may be. But that's how I'm interpreting it. based on the information that you have, the knowledge that you have. Just a hypothesis, you know? Now, as for Gaster, I think Gaster is going to be the protagonist. Gaster is going to try to stop Kara. Gaster followed Kara when they traveled to the different world. And they're trying to warn others, Toriel especially, of Kara. So I think Kara wanted Toriel to stay. So she didn't encounter Gaster because I think Gaster was going to warn Toriel. But Kara knew about this, was 2 steps ahead, and stopped that from occurring. Kept Toriel inside the house, not to leave. Oh, let me go get something real quick. And when she's alone, Gaster takes advantage of this and uses this to, tell Toriel what's really going on. Warns her, but says, hey, don't tell them that you know uh, about what's going on. Just be careful and watch out. So I think Gaster is going to take an interesting role here. Yeah, that's what I think. I could be wrong. It might be revealed later. It's like, oh, actually, Toriel is the Roaring Knight, Knight River or something like that. But yeah, that's where I'm at right now. So yeah, I might be completely wrong. I might be completely wrong. But that's what I think. And maybe Frisk might also be a character we might encounter because, well, maybe not actually. Anyways, that's it for this video. The next video should be my first playthrough of Deltarune Chapter 3. So we're going to start Season 3, Episode 1. That's going to be exciting. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this. Let me know what you think about my theory. It's not really well thought out, It's just a basic theory, what I think. But that's it. See ya.